This is the Mindful Heart Hears, and you are listening to First Olympic Games. The following is taken from the story of the Greek people by Eva March Tipan. Some adaptations have been made to the text. There was one thing in which the Greeks were united, and that was the games, what we now call the Olympics. These games were so specific to their culture that no one who was not a Greek could take part. The most famous of these games were held at Olympia in Elis. Despite all the changes between the different Greek city-states, the games always continued, and they were regarded as being so sacred that no matter how fiercely two Greek tribes might be fighting, they always had a truce during the time of the Olympian Games, and the days allowed for going and returning. No Greek who could afford to make the journey would think of losing a celebration of the Games. And the roads leading to Olympia must have been a wonderfully interesting sight for a week or two before and after the midsummer days on which the festival was held. Imagine the first day of the celebration. The different city-states each had sent representatives, and these men wore their richest garments and rode in the handsomest chariots that could be obtained. Generally speaking, women were not allowed to participate in these games. The Greeks greatly enjoyed processions, so much so that there was always a parade of these, and after it, most certainly a solemn sacrifice to the Greek god Zeus. Then came the important work of making sure that those who wished to engage in the games had a right to do so. Not only the athletes, but the umpires and trainers had to swear that they were free-born Greeks of unmixed blood and that they would obey the rules of the games. Even with this oath, they had also to prove their citizenship, and the athletes had to show that they had followed the rules of diet and training required. This would occupy the first day from morning till night. The following 3 or more days were reserved for the actual games. There was racing, wrestling, boxing, leaping, throwing of quoits, and hurling of javelins. But one of the most exciting and anticipated of the events occurred on the last of the game days. These were famous four-horse chariot races. When the moment had come, there was a loud blast on the trumpets, the barriers fell, and the horses darted forward, while the crowd shouted and cheered in excitement. One final day was reserved to honor the victors. A boy was sent to the sacred grove to cut with a golden knife branches from a wild olive tree. These were made into wreaths, which were presented to the champions. It was the proudest moment of a man's life when the herald called his name, his father's name, and that of his native city, and he stepped forward to receive his crown. The crowds shouted their applause, and he likely forgot the long, weary months of training and thought only of the fame that he had won. The olive wreath, with all that it stood for, was reward enough, but there were many more honors that came to these champions. He usually had the honor of making a sacrifice to Zeus before all of his countrymen, for he had brought glory to their country. While the sacrifice was burning, they marched around the altar in a procession, singing choruses of praise to the gods and playing the music of the flute and the cithara. This was only the beginning, for the sacrifice was followed by numerous banquets. The city that presided at the games gave feasts to the victors, and the victors gave feasts to their friends. Even this was not all, for often a statue in honor of the successful man was set up at Olympia, and maybe another at his own home. Even the return of a victor to his native city was a splendid sight. Upon his return, he was dressed in a rich purple robe and brought to his home in a chariot drawn by 4 white horses. His friends and relatives followed him, all in their holiday clothing, along with a crowd of others singing and cheering and shouting at the top of their voices. When they had come to the walls, the procession stopped. "What need of walls of defense for a city that has such men as he?" the people cried. And then a piece of the city wall was torn down, and the 4 white horses pranced over the ruins. Of course, banquets followed, and often a generous gift of gold and silver. The philosophers of the day sometimes reminded the citizens that their victors in the games were of small value to the state. "They are of no use in peace," declared the wise men. "For not their minds but their bodies have been trained, and they are of no use in war, for the training is so one-sided that they soon break down if they attempt military service." Nevertheless, the worship of the athlete continued. In some places he dined every day at the expense of the city, and all the rest of his life had a front seat reserved for him in the theater. His name was carefully inscribed on the register that was kept at Olympia, and he was honored as long as he lived. The Greeks had so much regard for these games that they dated events from them, counting the year of a celebration in the following 3 years as an Olympiad. For instance, 776 BC, they called the first year of the first Olympiad. 770 BC, the third year of the second Olympiad. For more than 1,000 years, these games were continued without a break. Their influence upon Greek life could hardly be rated too highly. They affected commerce, for where so many thousands of people were gathered together, there must have been a great deal of buying and selling. They affected art, for at the games the sculptor could find the finest of living models. They affected the manners of the people, their regard for religious rites, and also their interest in literature and oratory. For the most of the games, contests in these lines were also held. The Greeks never became united into one nation, but the games did much to make them feel that they had interests in common, and that if a tribe called in the aid of a foreigner against another tribe, it was in some degree a traitor to the country.